Greetings and welcome back. This installment continues the review of the updates and upgrades that have already been accomplished over the last 18 months. During the midst of the first summer season, I came to understand the need for improved ventilation. Going up to the lake for a late afternoon or evening sail had me opening up a hot box. Not so much as a sauna, as I bought a compact dehumidifier that worked well to reduce the humidity levels in the main cabin. However, more air needed to be exchanged than provided by the passive ventilators. This didn't happen during the first season, as I could not make up my mind on the what. I initially planned to go with powered ventilators, but some very poor ratings kept me looking. The other option was some Dorade type ventilators, but if there was no wind and plenty of sun, they would do little to help. Ultimately, I selected the solar power ventilators that would be a plug-and-play fit with the passive ventilators already in place. They were an easy switchover and made a significant difference, especially for the head, but the cabin still got hot. Finally, as I was out in the wind and the waves learning to sail Sakina, I had a hard time, dreadful time, when I steered the boat into the wind to get the mainsail up solo. The boat never stayed head to wind very long, with or without power in any waves, and the mainsail would be all over me. Repeat procedure, taking the main down. I needed a hand on the wheel to track that direction until I was done on the foredeck. Electronic assistance was needed for my solo work. Lazy jacks also could surely help with the sail handling, but those could come later. I did not need something with lots of bells and whistles, just a quick hand for a short period. I looked up wheel pilots and was flabbergasted at the prices. Oh my word. Was it possible to get a tiller pilot and adapt it to fit somehow? Months went by as I debated on minimizing my spend. I was going to try the tiller pilot adaptation, but then a random search of eBay revealed an auction underway for a Simrad wheel pilot, reportedly in decent shape, having been recently removed in working order. I calculated the expected cost of the tiller pilot experiment, which might not work anyway, and that became the value that I was willing to risk on a different experiment and put in a bid. I won. Now this was given the fact that the Simrad wheel pilot was made for a pedestal mount, not a bulkhead mount. So it was going to take some fancy footwork, but I was ready to make it happen. It arrived, and I immediately figured out how to do a bench test to ensure that the electronics and motor were functional. They were. The mechanics, however, were another story. It might have been working before it was removed, but the removal process did some damage, and the outer bearing track was completely loose, and the inner belt track was partially loose. Contact cement and some clamps came to the rescue, and soon it looked almost as good as new, and was then fully bench tested. It took a few trips to make it happen, with a 2-hour round trip between the boat and the non-portable tools like the bandsaws and drill presses, but it happened. It was installed, and I began the configuration and tuning process, which took a few iterations. It's not perfect, as the 40-year-old wheel does not rotate perfectly through the same plane and has quite a bit of slop in the shaft. So there is a bit of occasional interference that makes the pilot want to bind if it turns more than 270 degrees. But that is not likely to happen in order to keep it on course. Eventually, the wheel assembly will be rebuilt so that the fit is much better. Another update I almost forgot to include is also an extremely key safety factor. The original equipment emergency start crank for the Volvo MD2B engine cannot be used because the mid-cabin location of the engine does not allow the crank to rotate past the mass compression post. So, if the starter battery is dead, you are dead in the water. Unless you can get her started in a little less than 1/2 turn of the crank. Not likely. I am shocked that this slipped through the prototype phase. I wonder when this was discovered and corrected in production, if it ever was. But with the help of a good friend who has a basement machine shop, this has been rectified. That's it for all of the significant updates and upgrades so far. There have been other minor things here and there. In the next installment, we will look at the next round of updates and upgrades for this winter, next spring, and then next summer. In addition, we will look at the full wish list of items that are thought to be necessary in order to be ready to launch out on the trip. Thanks for watching. By the way, what are you doing with your freedom?
Back to the course, which is out there somewhere.